Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the price of life-saving medicine could drop simply because two pharmaceutical giants clashed in court. That's not a distant dream. It's exactly what's unfolding right now after Regeneron, a biotech challenger, stunned the industry by winning a $407 million antitrust verdict against Amgen, one of the world's most powerful drug makers. But what does this courtroom drama actually mean for the cost of your medication, the power of Big Pharma, and the future of healthcare innovation? The answers might shock you, and they could change the way medicine is bought and sold in America. The pharmaceutical world has always been a battleground, but few fights have been as fierce or as consequential as the recent showdown between Regeneron and Amgen. At the center of the storm are two cholesterol-lowering drugs, Repatha from Amgen and Praluent from Regeneron. Both belong to a class called PCSK9 inhibitors, hailed as game changers in the fight against heart disease. But behind the scenes, it wasn't just science driving decisions. It was money, power, and a high-stakes game of market dominance. To understand what happened, you need to know how drugs reach your pharmacy shelf. It's not as simple as inventing a pill and selling it to the public. Drug companies negotiate with middlemen called pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. These PBMs control which medicines make it onto the list your insurance will actually pay for, the so-called formulary. Getting on that list can make or break a drug's success. Here's where things get complicated and controversial. Amgen, the juggernaut behind Repatha, allegedly struck deals with PBMs that bundled Repatha with two of its other blockbuster drugs. The catch? If PBMs wanted juicy discounts on all three, they had to ensure that 80–90% of their patients used Repatha instead of Regeneron's Praluent. According to internal Amgen documents, executives knew this would make it very difficult for Praluent to compete. This wasn't just aggressive business. In May 2025, a federal jury decided it was illegal. Amgen was found to have violated Section 1 of the Sherman Act and Section 3 of the Clayton Act, two pillars of U.S. antitrust law designed to protect competition. Regeneron's victory wasn't just a win for one company. Leonard Schleifer, Regeneron's CEO, declared, "This victory protects smaller biotech companies from being bullied by larger players using anti-competitive tactics." But not everyone agrees. Amgen insists its bundling was lawful and actually benefited patients by offering better value. Their spokesperson said, "We believe our bundling practices were lawful and pro-competitive, offering PBMs and patients better value." Some experts, like healthcare economist Jane Smith, point out that bundling can sometimes lower prices for consumers, but warn, the Amgen case suggests it was used to stifle innovation. So, who's right, and why does it matter so much? The answer could ripple through the entire pharmaceutical industry. John Doe, a leading antitrust attorney, explains, "This case demonstrates the increasing willingness of courts to scrutinize complex pharmaceutical pricing strategies under antitrust law. The Federal Trade Commission is now watching closely, with Commissioner Rebecca Kelly Slaughter promising, 'We are committed to ensuring that pharmaceutical companies compete fairly and that consumers have access to affordable medications.'" But the story is far from over. Amgen has already filed an appeal, arguing that the court misinterpreted the market and failed to prove anti-competitive intent. If the verdict stands, it could trigger a wave of antitrust lawsuits, force companies to rethink their pricing tactics, and even push the government to reform how PBMs negotiate drug prices. If it's overturned, the old playbook may return, and so will the status quo. So, as Regeneron celebrates and Amgen fights back, the real question hangs in the air. Will this landmark case finally open the door to fairer drug prices and more competition? Or will Big Pharma find a way to keep its grip on the market? The answer could determine the future of medicine, and it's coming sooner than you think. So, what happens next? The Regeneron-Amgen verdict is more than just a financial blow. It's a warning shot to the entire pharmaceutical industry. If the verdict stands, experts believe we could see a flood of new antitrust lawsuits, as smaller biotech firms feel empowered to challenge the giants. Professor Michael Carrier notes, "This verdict could embolden other companies to challenge bundling strategies, leading to a wave of litigation." Regulators like the FTC are now watching pharmaceutical bundling with renewed intensity. The FTC may push for stricter rules and greater transparency in how drugs are priced and sold to pharmacy benefit managers. There's talk of potential reforms that could force Big Pharma to play by fairer rules or risk hefty penalties. But there are risks too. Amgen's appeal could overturn the verdict, reinforcing the status quo and sending a signal that aggressive bundling is still a viable tactic. Even if the judgment holds, large companies might simply adapt, finding new loopholes to maintain their dominance. As healthcare economist Jane Smith warns, bundling can lower prices, but it can also be weaponized to limit competition. What does this mean for you? If you rely on prescription drugs or care about healthcare costs, this case matters. If courts and regulators crack down on anti-competitive tactics, we might see more choices and potentially lower prices. But if Big Pharma adapts faster than the regulators, the cycle of high prices and limited access could continue. For investors and industry insiders, this is a signal to watch legal and regulatory trends closely. Companies that rely too heavily on aggressive pricing strategies could face costly lawsuits or lose market share to more innovative, fair competitors. So, will this verdict truly disrupt Big Pharma's pricing power? The answer? It's a pivotal moment, but not a knockout blow. The industry's dominance won't crumble overnight, but the ground is shifting. This case is a wake-up call and a test for regulators to keep up with corporate tactics. And here's a secret fact. Internal Amgen emails revealed that executives knew their bundling scheme would make it very difficult for rivals like Regeneron to compete, proof that behind every drug price tag, there's a high-stakes chess match you rarely see. If you want to stay ahead of global economics and tech